What's going on, everyone? We hope you enjoyed your weekend and are ready for one of the most exciting weeks in the market in some time. We have huge tech companies like Apple, Tesla, Meta, Microsoft, and many more set to release earnings. We have an FOMC interest rate decision this week and a Powell speech, let alone all of the other craziness that's already going on in the market. In today's video, we're going to cover everything you have to know for the week, some great setups to keep on your radar, and some other things to watch very closely. The market is still very close to all-time highs, and we saw a little bit of profit taking on Friday. So, Tom, let's get right to it.
Yeah, that was a good push by the SPY early in the morning Friday. Then we started to see a pretty big sell-off come in as a lot of chip stocks started selling down. And I know this week we are going to see a ton of chip stocks report earnings. I know, Mike, you already named some of the big players out there, but Monday we're going to have SoFi, AT&T, Tuesday, Boeing, General Motors, Lockheed Martin, Starbucks. Now here's where it gets fun, guys. Wednesday in after hours, Tesla, Meta, Microsoft. Those three. I don't know that you could have a bigger three-stock rundown on a given day. And then Thursday, we have Apple and Intel in after hours too. So quite a bit of tech going on this week, Mike. And I know there's going to be a lot of eyes on many different stocks. Meta has been on fire lately. If we go to their chart really quickly, they have been loving this recent upside movement out of the market. And they're actually breaking some pretty good resistances here to the upside. But on the flip side of things, you know, we can go to like Tesla and Apple, and they've actually been a little bit weak.
That's the thing. So we have some big tech stocks that have been very weak, like Apple and Tesla, that have been definitely selling off for some time now. But we have other tech stocks like Meta and Google that are right at all-time highs or even pushing new ones, what seems like every single day. And earnings season is so important and crazy for the market because, of course, you're going to have some of the biggest, craziest stocks in the market like Tesla, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, and other stocks move in the craziest ways than they normally do. And, of course, that'll influence the market. But what especially makes this week so interesting is that we are going to see earnings from over 100 members of the S&P 500 just for this week alone. So, you know, there's definitely going to be some big movement. And what happens this week, I think will have a big impact on what the rest of the trend looks like in the short term.
Yeah, and you know, looking at a lot of these trends for a lot of these different stocks, like Apple, for example, they've been actually trending down in a pretty big way, like we mentioned, and there's some pretty big support that they're straddling right around this $220 mark where we've seen a ton of good bounces. And same thing goes for Tesla, which has been weak in the short term as well. You know, they're starting to fall down, and they're going to be testing that 380, 379 support coming up, maybe even 360 if they start to drop enough. And that's where like these earnings could really make or break some of these moves and some of these overall trends. Like Apple here, if we start to see a good report and a good bounce back up, that'll give investors a lot of confidence to start buying the dip back to the upside. But as we know, Apple's had a lot of problems in China lately, and if the support does give out, it's going to be pretty brutal, Mike, and there's a pretty big overall, I would say, like gap or just zone on the chart down to that key $200 support.
Yeah, this week will be important, and it'll have a big influence on what the short-term trend ends up looking like. So definitely keep your eyes open for big tech earnings for this week. But we also have a very important FOMC interest rate decision. This is also pretty crazy. So basically on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, the central bank is going to adjust interest rates. And as of right now, there's around a 98% chance that they're going to keep interest rates exactly how they are. But of course, there always is that chance that they hike them higher or cut them lower. This is very important because whenever you have the central bank adjusting interest rates, it influences everything else in the stock market and just the economy in general. One thing that is especially interesting and different now compared to the recent short term is that, as we can see by looking at the path forward, we can see that interest rates are expected to stay, you know, pretty much the same for as far out as we can see, except for that 125 basis point cut that is expected to happen on June 18th of 2025. Either way, this interest rate decision will be very important, especially because Trump has been pretty vocal about trying to get interest rates down immediately, and it doesn't sound like Powell is too happy to play that game.
Yeah, he really hasn't. And I know Powell and a lot of the Fed members, they keep being vocal about being independent and they try not to let politics influence what they do. And we'll see maybe how Trump tries to apply some pressure or something along those lines. But I really like looking at the Fed Watch tool, though, Mike, because it just gives us that really good insight and shows us like what the market is actually pricing in. And, you talked about that 25 basis point cut that's priced in for June on the June 18th meeting. And then we're pretty much set in stone for a lot of pauses. And I really think that the cool thing about this meeting is that we'll just get more insight for the future. We'll obviously hear about maybe what the Federal Reserve is thinking as far as like some of these next meetings coming up. So I think that we'll see a huge shift on this on this Fed Watch tool coming up later in the week. So definitely be ready for that. We'll be checking back in, of course, on this one as the week progresses.
You know it. And then also, of course, this will be the first FOMC decision under Trump's presidency. So that'll add, a little bit of differences. But another thing, too, is that the U.S. Central Bank is not the only major central bank decision for the week. We can see Canada and a lot of countries in America are making big central bank decisions this week. So keep that in mind. And then we have a lot of Europe set to make some big decisions on Thursday as well. So it is going to be an active week.
Very active, Mike. I know last week a lot of people were talking about the Bank of Japan and all their interest rate decisions going on. And I think Europe will be very interesting right after hours as well. And hopefully they pause, but you never know, right? Obviously, there's a lot of different central banks reporting, so there might be a lot of differences out there. Of course, keep your eyes on hours as Powell is the main prize this week. But, Mike, there is actually more on the economic calendar as well. On Tuesday, 1 hour before market open, there is durable goods orders. On Thursday, we get the GDP growth rate. And then, oh my gosh, Mike, I mean, to add more fuel to the fire this week, we're going to be having PCE data, which is actually the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, coming out on Friday, 2 days after their meeting. So perfect timing there, right? There's going to be a lot of talk with inflation this week.
You know it. It is going to be a very exciting week. So shifting more into some of the market action that we saw from Friday, there was a fair amount of profit taking across the board, which, was worth observing, but it wasn't anything like too crazy scary. One thing that definitely stood out is that we saw a decent amount of profit taking and bearishness out of the chip stocks and especially Nvidia. And I think a lot of this was actually connected to TXN's earnings from Friday, which certainly weren't showing the best signs.
Yeah, they definitely weren't. They came out with a profit forecast for Q1, Mike, and it looks like they're having some inventory problems, and they came out with a pretty bad forecast here. They're forecasting 94 cents to $1.16 on their EPS versus estimates of 1.17. So with them coming in at 0.94 to 1.16, that's a pretty big range under that 1.17 estimate. And I think that the really big concern here is how they're really talking about all of these bad inventory concerns. They're talking about inventory hitting their profits, and of course a lot of other chip stocks started to fall from this. So maybe we'll get some more insights from some of these other tech and chip related companies with their earnings coming up soon. But this was definitely a big piece of news that I thought pushed a lot of these chip stocks lower. And you can kind of go to the heat map and really tell that whenever you go to the top here with the chip stocks, it wasn't the best day. Pretty much all of them were down. Even Intel down like 3.4% too.
Exactly. So, for those of you who don't know, TXN is a pretty big semiconductor/chip company, and they reported, good earnings now, but they basically said in the future they're not going to do as good as everyone thought that they were going to do, and they've been having some demand issues, which definitely sent some worries across the chip space as a whole, which is part of the reason we saw such a red day from Nvidia on Friday. So that had a pretty decent influence on the market as a whole. And as we look deeper into like what's going on in the market right now, what are you seeing in terms of like charts, analysis, and everything on that front, Tom?
Yeah, the SPY did great on Friday, I thought, especially early on, right? We saw a good breakout. The SPY ran up to new all-time highs, up to around 610.75, very close to there. So keep your eyes on that next week. That'll be a big level. But on this massive sell-off that started to happen, we fell back under 610 and even back under 608. So now there's some key levels that I'm watching here in the short term. I really like 608 as good resistance coming up for Monday morning. If that breaks, I'll be watching 608.50, 609, and then 610 coming up. Of course, that recent high is going to be very, very important. But that sell-off on Friday was pretty massive, Mike. If we start to see another pullback and we start to really break back below this like 606.80 low from Friday, that could end up being or showing a pretty negative sign here in the short term. So I am getting a little bit worried that if these chip stocks and just tech stocks this week don't show the best earnings, we might end up seeing some more pullback out of the SPY. But I really like that low from Friday around 606.80. That's going to be very important to hold.
I agree, because if the market does not hold that level, it'll just show increasing signs of weakness, and it'll show that the profit taking is definitely, growing a fair amount. And I don't think it's something to like immediately panic about, especially considering how close the market still is to all-time highs. But if you are seeing a sign like that, especially on a big earnings and FOMC week, you can't ignore it.
Yeah, definitely not. And as I'm strategizing and coming up with plans for this week, I'm going to be very open-minded on direction, because that was a pretty massive pullback, and I am still bullish overall, right? Like, that's just a little pullback on the overall move for SPY, so we could end up bouncing right off of here and coming back. So just have a very open mind. Be willing to adapt this week with the earnings as well. We might see a lot of mixture out there. Some stocks might have good reports, some might have bad, so there might be a little bit of offsets happening in the market this week.
You know it. All right, well, let's get right to some setups and predictions then. A stock that is close on my radar is PDD, and it is to the upside. PDD had a great day on Fridays. It popped up by over 7%. The price action intraday was amazing, and even looking at this stock on the daily chart, we are seeing some good signs where it has been making higher lows initially from like that $90 area, now up to like $94, which is good to see. It's already past the $100 resistance, and it has a decent amount of room to continue running if it can sustain this level of momentum. This stock is definitely on my bullish radar, not specifically for tomorrow, but definitely like in the short term in general.
Yeah, this is amazing. I love how PDD and all those China stocks had that rip back in like September and October, and they did start to fall off a bit from there, but we're starting to see some great recoveries coming in, so I'll definitely be watching PDD very closely. It looks like a really awesome chart setup. With my next setup, I'm looking at Google, and I also think they have a great chart setup going on as well. We're seeing a lot of good breakouts in the short term. You can go look at Meta breaking recent highs and many other stocks that have had this surge of positive momentum that's been helping to fuel the market to these highs. Google is stuck right around a key $200 resistance. Now, I will say it did extend a little bit over 200 recently. There's been a lot of rejection close to 201 to even 202. So keep watching for that. But going to the Bookmap, Mike, this is going to be a major, major level to get above for Google. There's been a lot of sellers stacked up around this 200 to 202 area for a long time. If we can see a good break above 202, I'm going to be watching for a good break. There are some sellers stacked up around 205 that you can maybe target, as well as 210 to the upside. So those are maybe some targets and some areas to look for once we get this clear 202 break. But it would be awesome to just see Google continue up on the daily chart the way it is. So many stocks are breaking out, and this one has been one of the hotter ones.
All right, sounds good. I'll definitely keep that one on watch. But another stock that is close on the radar is Nvidia, but it is to the downside. So it is still struggling at this $150 area of resistance, and the Friday price action surely wasn't great. Even with all of the positive AI talk, euphoria, and news lately, especially with Trump's multi-$100 billion AI infrastructure investment deal, Nvidia hasn't been running in a way that I think investors are like truly happy or euphoric about, and I think that says a lot about the underlying like supply and demand dynamic with this stock. Either way, I am bearish on it in the short term, and I am looking for a potential retest of that $136 area, but I cannot emphasize enough that the $150 level of resistance will be important, and if for any reason the stock does get back to that level and break through it, it's important to adjust yourself to the new trend.
Yeah, that is a huge level overhead. It's been rejecting there many times. And even like on Friday and Wednesday of last week, there were multiple rejections on this stock very close to there. So I'll definitely be watching it down as well. And with my next setup, I'm also watching another stock to the downside. That's FSLR. We talked about some of these solar stocks having some bad reactions to Trump's presidency. And I am still watching FSLR for a further breakdown. I talked about it a little bit last week. It played out pretty well Thursday morning, but ended up ripping back on Friday. I think the setup's starting to show a lot more potential to the downside. And even if there is some chop on the way down here, I think overall this recent support break around 175 was great. As long as we stay under there, that's a pretty good sign for FSLR. So I'm just going to keep watching for more good intraday scalping potential out of this downside support break on the daily.
All right, sounds great there. Well, besides that, Tom, it is now about that time for today's momentum plays. And with the first one, we have Oklo again to the upside.
Yeah, the stock is on fire right now. If they can break the high of day Friday right around 43.70, keep watching them to the upside.
All right, with the next one, we have ARM, but to the downside.
Poor ARM in that chip sector sold off a bit Friday. If they fall under support right around $162, then keep watching them down as well.
All right, and then with the last one, we have Futu to the upside.
FUTU, very amazing breakout Friday, up 5%, getting close to $100. That'll be a nice test, but I'm looking for a break above 97.30.
Sounds good. So we have Futu and Oklo on watches for potential moves higher, and then we have ARM on watch for a potential move lower. Either way, these three stocks are on watch for momentum plays, where if they break the levels listed, we are looking for potential continuations, but they have to break the levels listed and understand that these stocks are volatile, so you have to have stop losses with them, as is true with any other type of trade in any other possible situation. Be happy and willing to adjust with the trend changes as they happen, and these stocks have momentum, so definitely keep them close on watch. But besides that, we also have to dive into today's $363,000 big money trade, and we are looking at ticker symbol CRSP. So this stock has been doing pretty well in the short term, nothing like too crazy, but the big money has been buying up some of this recent dip action, as on Friday they bought up the 45 strike call options for July 18th of 2025. For my advanced traders out there, this is also technically a call debit spread where they shorted the 55 strike call options. But either way, this is a bullish trade where the traders are betting that CRSP will rise. Looking at this stock in the short term, we can see that it has been holding somewhat steady. There's a fair amount of support at like $40 a share and even like $39, where resistance closer to like 45, 46, and 47.50. But we have been seeing increasing momentum with like health and like biotech stocks in general in the short term, and CRSP does have some room to benefit from that, but at the same time there is a fair amount of time left to this trade, so assuming you're willing to give this trade the time it needs, then maybe it's something worth keeping on your radar.
The more I zoom out on the daily chart with this, the wilder it becomes, Mike. Like, there's been so many bounces down here on support. Like you're zoomed in here, it looks pretty good double bottom, but it's like, oh my gosh, this stock has bounced off of this 4 or 5 times, and we're starting to see a pretty clear extension back to the upside here. I think this is a pretty awesome big money play. It's down around a good support, so the risk reward ratio can be pretty fire. And as we know, some of these therapeutical or pharma stocks can end up going pretty crazy sometimes with a little bit of news. And if there's a little bit of hype in this sector, like you're saying, that could be exactly what they need. So either way, CRSP, very interesting big money play. Not the most money I've ever seen, but I don't blame them either, because these therapeutic stocks can be pretty risky.
No doubt. So either way, keep it close on watch going forward. But before we continue on, Tom, let's give a giant shout out to today's member of the day, Isaiah, in the StockedUp Discord. They had a great post on Friday saying it will be a year in August, but we look good so far. And he posted some awesome gains there and some amazing account growth. So huge shout out to you, Isaiah. Keep up the great work going forward. And it is awesome to see screenshots like this one. If you guys are new to the StockedUp YouTube channel, consider obliterating that subscribe button to get our videos recommended to you more often. We post all the time and cover the most important news, information, charts, charts, earnings, setups, and big money trades that you have to keep on your radar. It takes us hours to make these videos, and we try to cover everything in around 20 to 25 minutes or less. So consider joining the Stocked Up crew. But besides that, we have a very exciting week ahead of us. Earnings will be very important, and I think this FOMC decision on Wednesday will say a lot about what's truly going on right now with the central bank, because there's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now, to put it simply, and there are a lot of eyes on Powell. So it'll definitely be a very exciting week. Thank you all so much for watching, and let's crush it in the market tomorrow.